I am Martha of Bethany, daughter of Simon, sister to Mary and Lazarus. Our home stood on the gentle slope of the Mount of Olives, where the evening breeze carried the scent of olive oil and figs. From my youth, I learned that peace rarely comes to those who keep a house. Peace must be fought for, tended like fire. Mother died early. Father's health waned soon after. So I became the keeper of everything, the cook, the host, the one who made sure the lamps never ran out of oil and the jars were never empty. People said, Martha is strong. But strength is a strange companion, it never lets you rest. Mary would often sit by the window, her eyes following the road, her lips moving as though in prayer. Lazarus, my gentle brother, always the peacemaker, always with that easy laugh that made even my worries soften. One morning, word spread of a teacher who spoke as no man had ever spoken. They said his words healed more than sickness, they healed hearts. Lazarus was the first to go hear him. When he returned, his eyes glowed with something that frightened and fascinated me, faith. He looked at me, Martha, he said, trembling. As though he saw me before I was born. I smiled and served him stew, pretending not to feel the stirring in my chest. Faith was a luxury I could not afford, there were floors to sweep, bread to bake, and people to host. But that evening, when Mary returned home, silent and radiant, I knew something had changed forever. The teacher came to our house. It was Lazarus who invited him, but it was I who had to make everything ready. Our courtyard filled with neighbors and travelers. Dusty feet, eager eyes, voices whispering, Rabbi. Rabbi. He entered with a calmness that unsettled me, as though he carried heaven inside him. I greeted him with a respectful bow, hiding my nervousness behind hospitality. Mary, of course, sat at his feet, drinking in every word. Every pot boiled. Every jar emptied. My heart pounded with the rhythm of duty. And then I said it. Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her to help me. He looked at me, not with rebuke, but with affection so deep it melted the hardness in me. Martha, Martha, he said softly. You are anxious and troubled about many things. But one thing is needed. Mary has chosen that good part, which shall not be taken away from her. The words pierced me, yet they also freed me. For the first time, I realized that my hands were full, but my heart was empty. Still, I loved him for how he said my name, not with judgment, but with compassion. That night, as I cleaned the table and watched the oil lamp flicker, I whispered to the dark. Maybe one day, I too will learn to sit and listen. Years passed, and our home became a refuge for the teacher whenever he came near Jerusalem. We fed him, listened, and learned. Lazarus grew strong in faith, Mary more gentle, and I, though still busy, began to find peace in serving him. But peace is a fragile guest. It started with a cough. Then weakness. Then the sound of Lazarus struggling for breath in the middle of the night. I tried herbs. I tried prayers. I sent for every physician in Bethany, but their faces said what their lips would not, he is fading. Mary knelt beside him, tears falling on his hand. I stood by the door, clutching the frame so hard my fingers bled. When the fever raged, I whispered to her, we must send for the Master. He will come. He loves us. Mary nodded, eyes swollen. So we sent a messenger, Lord, the one you love is sick. Every hour felt like a year. I kept glancing at the road, expecting to see him appear with that calm step, that unhurried certainty. But the days stretched, and Lazarus grew weaker. By the third day, even hope felt heavy. When he breathed his last, I was not beside him, I was fetching water. I dropped the jar when I heard Mary scream. The funeral lasted 3 days. Bethany filled with mourners. I welcomed them, poured wine, offered comfort, kept my voice steady, because someone had to. But every time I looked toward the road, my chest tightened. He did not come. The one who healed strangers, who spoke and the dead rose, he did not come for his friend. I buried my pain beneath duty. But when the fourth day dawned, someone ran into the courtyard shouting, "The teacher is here." I froze. A war broke out inside me, between grief and faith, between disappointment and love. I went out to meet him before he even reached the village. The sun was high, the road was dry and dusty. When I saw him, the tears I had hidden broke free. "Lord, if you had been here," I said, my voice trembling, "my brother would not have died." He looked at me, oh, how he looked at me, and said, "Your brother will rise again." I whispered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Then he said words that shattered time itself. "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live." In that moment, I understood, faith is not about what he does. It's about who he is. I ran to call Mary, shouting, "The Master is here and is calling for you." When Mary left the house to meet him, I stayed back a while, watching the crowd follow her, whispering. Some said, "Could not this man, who opened the eyes of the blind, also have kept Lazarus from dying?" Their words stung like salt on wounds I was trying to hide. I walked the path slowly toward the tomb, a hollow in the rock near the olive grove. The smell of spices lingered from the burial. Every step felt like walking through unanswered prayers. Then I saw him again, standing near the tomb. His eyes were moist. He wept. The sight of the teacher crying for my brother broke me. I had spent days being strong, holding everyone else, pretending to understand. But in that moment, I realized, he did care. He had always cared. He turned to me and said, "Where have you laid him?" "Come and see, Lord," I whispered, leading the way. The mourners followed, murmuring, unsure of what he would do. Something in the air felt different, heavy and holy. I could hear my heartbeat echo in my ears. We stopped before the tomb, the stone still sealed. Jesus looked toward heaven, as though listening to something only he could hear. Then he said quietly, "Take away the stone." "Lord," I said quickly, the practical woman still fighting inside me. "By this time there will be a stench, for he has been dead 4 days." He turned and looked at me, and his voice was firm yet gentle. "Did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God?" Belief. That word again, the word that demanded surrender, not effort, that I stepped back, nodding through tears. "Take away the stone," he said again. Strong men pushed against it. The stone groaned and rolled aside. A rush of air escaped the tomb, heavy, cold, carrying the smell of death. Mary buried her face in her shawl. I could barely breathe. Jesus lifted his face and prayed. "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me. But because of the people who stand by, I say this, that they may believe you sent me." Then, with a voice that thundered through eternity, he cried, "Lazarus, come forth." Silence. And then, movement. The gasp that escaped my lips still echoes in my memory. From the darkness of the tomb, my brother, bound hand and foot in grave clothes, stepped into the light. Mary screamed. I fell to my knees, the crowd shouted and wept. Jesus smiled and said, "Loose him, and let him go." And I understood, faith isn't waiting for him to show up. Faith is trusting that even when he seems late, he's already at work beyond what we see. Days later, our home was full again, but this time, with joy. The teacher sat at our table, and Lazarus, my Lazarus, laughed again, whole and radiant. The air smelled of roasted lamb and sweet spikenard that I served them, but my heart was light now that I wasn't working to impress or prove anything. I was serving out of gratitude. Mary came with her alabaster jar. I knew that jar. She had kept it for something sacred. She broke it open, pouring the perfume on his feet, the fragrance filling the room. Judas complained, but Jesus silenced him with tenderness. "Let her alone," he said. "She has kept this for the day of my burial." I froze. Burial? My heart clenched. Was he speaking of leaving us? He smiled at me as though he heard my thoughts. That night, as I cleared the table, he looked around our home and said quietly, "Where I am, there my friends are also." I didn't understand it then. But those words became a promise that carried me through every storm after he was gone. Soon after, the world around us shifted. Rumors filled Jerusalem, the priests were plotting, the crowds were dividing. And Lazarus, because he was living proof of the miracle, became a target that I feared again. Not the kind of fear that paralyzes, but the kind that whispers, "What if faith costs too much?" Then, news came, the teacher had been taken. Crucified. My knees buckled when I heard. Mary screamed as if her soul tore in half. Lazarus wept like a child that I couldn't move. All I could remember was his voice. "I am the resurrection and the life." But how could life die? For 3 days, our home was filled with silence. The same silence that once filled it when Lazarus was gone. The same ache. The same waiting. But on the 3rd day, a runner came shouting from Jerusalem. "He is risen." Mary dropped her jar, and I fell to my knees, sobbing with joy and terror and faith all at once. Because in that moment, I realized, he had done again what no one could ever do. He had defeated death, not for one man, but for all. After the news reached Bethany, we ran, Mary and I, toward Jerusalem. The road was crowded with whispers, "The stone is rolled away. The body is gone." Angels appeared. I didn't know what to believe. Grief and hope wrestled inside me. When we reached the garden, I saw Peter and John running back, faces pale with shock. The tomb, empty. The burial cloths, neatly folded. The air, filled with the scent of resurrection. Mary lingered longer. She came back trembling, saying she had seen him, seen the Lord alive. Her words sounded impossible, yet her eyes burned with truth. And I knew, the same voice that had called, "Lazarus, come forth," had now stepped out of his own grave. That night, I looked at the stars from our rooftop and whispered, "You are truly the resurrection and the life." I believe, Lord. Even when I don't see, I believe. After the resurrection, our home in Bethany became something else, a place where stories breathed. Travelers came from faraway towns, asking, "Is this the house where Lazarus rose?" And I would smile and say, "Yes. But the greater miracle is the one who lives forever." I cooked for them, prayed with them, shared the story again and again. At first, I thought I was just being hospitable. Then I realized, hospitality had become my ministry. Mary spoke gently, Lazarus testified boldly, and I welcomed and nurtured faith in weary hearts. Each meal became a message, each loaf of bread a reminder that Jesus still feeds his people. Sometimes, when I served strangers, I would feel his presence near, as if he were sitting among them. And when I poured water into a traveler's cup, I'd remember his words at our table. "Where I am, there my friends are also." I finally understood what he meant. Faith wasn't just believing he could do miracles, it was living as if he was still here. But even in joy, fear has a way of creeping back. Rumors spread again, that the chief priests wanted Lazarus dead because many were believing in Jesus because of him. My heart trembled. Hadn't we lost enough? Would this story of life bring death again? One night, I sat by the fire, watching Lazarus sleep, his chest rising peacefully. I whispered, "Lord, if you are still here, keep him safe." And in that stillness, I felt it, not a voice, but a certainty. As if he said, "Did I not call him forth myself? What I bring to life, no one can bury again." Tears filled my eyes. The same Jesus who once stood by a tomb now stood by our home, unseen but alive. From that night, I stopped fearing. Faith had taken root, not in miracles I could see, but in the unshakable presence I could feel. Years passed, and the roads grew quieter. The disciples traveled far, Peter, John, and the rest, carrying the gospel everywhere. Lazarus and I stayed in Bethany, tending to the home that had once hosted heaven. I often sat at the same spot where Jesus once reclined, hearing echoes of his laughter, his words. Mary would pray softly beside me, and together we would remember. One evening, a young woman came knocking, weary and tear-streaked. She said, "I've lost everything. Can God still love me?" I took her hand and said, "Sit down, child. Let me tell you about a man named Jesus, and my brother who died and lived again." She wept as I spoke, but when I finished, she smiled faintly and said, "I believe." That night, I realized, I had become what he saw in me long ago. The anxious hostess had become a teacher of peace, and sometimes, when the wind passed through the olive branches, I could almost hear his voice, "Martha, Martha, you have chosen the good part." The years rolled by, and Bethany changed. The Roman road grew busier, the world more restless, but our little home remained a sanctuary, a place of peace. Travelers came not only for food now, but for stories. They would sit under our olive tree and ask, "Tell us again what he said before he raised Lazarus." And I would smile, pour water into their cups, and say, "He said, I am the resurrection and the life." He didn't just say it, he proved it. Sometimes I saw people arrive weary and leave renewed, just from hearing his words. It amazed me that the same mouth that once scolded my sister for sitting still now taught others how to rest in his presence. Service was still my joy, but it was no longer my burden. That I had learned to work with peace, to speak with faith, to serve with love, and when I felt his absence, I would whisper, "Even if you are unseen, I will still prepare a place for you here." Time is a gentle thief. My hands grew wrinkled, my hair turned silver, but my heart burned brighter than ever. Lazarus had grown old too, still strong, still grateful. Mary had gone to live with believers near Jerusalem, tending to widows. I stayed behind in Bethany, the place where death once ended and life began again. Sometimes I'd sit beneath the fig tree near the path where I once ran to meet him. And I would close my eyes and remember the sound of his footsteps. That morning, I felt the air shift. The world was quiet, but my soul was awake. I called Lazarus and said, "Brother, I feel as though he's near." He smiled. "He never left, Martha." I laid my head back against the wall and whispered, "Yes." He never did. My final breath came not with fear, but with peace, as if someone had opened a door and light had walked in, and I knew, the same Jesus who once wept outside our tomb now stood waiting to welcome me home. After my passing, they say travelers still came to Bethany. And when they entered our home, they could still feel peace. The house became known as the house of the friend of Jesus. Children played near the old olive tree. Women gathered to bake bread. Men rested from their journeys and prayed in silence. And every visitor said the same thing. "It feels like he has just left the room." My story was told and retold, not because I was perfect, but because I learned what it means to believe even when it hurts. They said I was the woman who served, who questioned, who wept, and who waited. But heaven knew me as the woman who believed. For faith does not silence the storm, it steadies the heart through it. And the same Jesus who loved our little house in Bethany still loves the homes and hearts that make room for him today. I speak now not from Bethany, but from beyond it. From where time folds into light and love never ends. That if I could tell you one thing, it would be this. Don't mistake his silence for his absence. When he delays, he is never late, he's preparing a greater glory. I once worried about bread and dishes. Now I sit at the eternal table. And I see that the same hands that broke bread on earth now serve it in heaven. He is still the resurrection. He is still the life. And he still calls your name, waiting for your yes. So, dear listener, don't let doubt keep you at the doorway. Run to him, even when it hurts. Believe, even when it's been 4 days too long. Because faith isn't about seeing the miracle. It's about trusting the miracle maker. If this story stirred something in your heart, let your faith rise again. Share this message. Invite him back into your home, into your waiting, into your life, because even now, he is here. If Martha's story has touched you, remember, your waiting is not wasted. Jesus may seem silent, but he is never absent. Like Martha, your faith can rise again. Subscribe, share, and let someone else's faith awaken today. Because resurrection still happens, in hearts that believe.